Um, we've got 4 panelists for you today, including 2 people who work in universities and 2 people who work in schools. And we're going to talk about making links between schools and universities in lots of different kinds of ways. And we're hoping that those of you in the room will have questions, suggestions, things that you've done yourselves that you'd like to tell us about, examples of good practice, that kind of thing. So why don't we start with a round of very quick introductions for the 4 of us to tell you who we are. I'll go first because I'm talking anyway. My name is Tim Hutchings. I'm a university lecturer at the University of Nottingham in the Department of Philosophy, where I'm the Associate Professor of Religious Ethics, is my job title. But I do lots of lecturing around particularly sociology of religion, and I'm interested in researching from the religion and worldviews approach to RE, and have done lots of work around that. So let's go over to Hayley next. Who are you, Hayley?
Hi, so I'm Hayley Ellen. I currently work in a large sixth form college in Essex. We offer both philosophy A-level and also religious studies A-level. So we have both, and we have quite healthy cohorts for both. I have worked in schools previously, and really when moving to the college a couple of years ago, one of the things that I was really interested in is not just teaching what is on the specification, but also how we can inspire our students to want to take it further, to want to investigate different areas to do with religious studies, not just perhaps what they might have covered on the specifications for the A-levels or perhaps further down, lower down in the school. So that's me.
Thank you. Paul, tell us who you are.
So my title is Senior Lecturer in Religious Studies, and I'm at the Open University. One of my current research projects is currently called Democracy, Disinformation and Religion, and that's an interdisciplinary project bringing together colleagues at the OU from politics and religious studies, but also some colleagues at Cambridge and King's College in London, to look at different instances of the role of religious institutions, communities, and other actors in disinformational actions. Delighted to be here this morning.
And a point that I think might be interesting to teachers in the audience. When you're teaching religious studies at the Open University, Paul, like discipline-wise, does theology come into that?
So you can't avoid teaching some theological debates, right? So liberation theology is something that will get mentioned or talked about. Reformation theology is going to get talked about, but broadly our approach is more aligned to, I suppose, to a lived religion type approach. So perhaps we're just a religious studies department. We're not a theology and religious studies department, but we're interdisciplinary. If you do religious studies at the OU, you do it with arts, or you do it with social sciences, or you do a specific religion and philosophy pathway.
Okay. So just for interested teachers, I think different universities set up the subject of religious studies in quite different ways. So at my university, this is now part of the Department of Philosophy, and you do a degree in theology and religion, which has lots of Christian theology and Islamic philosophy and Buddhist philosophy, and then I'm there doing a bit of religious studies, whereas the OU kind of divides up those disciplines in quite a different sort of way, which is just, so it becomes a different sort of subject as you go on in different directions. Anyway, I got distracted. Rachael, tell us who you are. Give us our fourth introduction.
My name's Rachael. In my home school, I'm a head of RE and also a teaching and learning lead, but I'm also the lead for RE across all of our schools. In addition to that, I also do voluntary work. So I'm the higher education and exams officer for NATRE. So I link a lot with the university through that. And I also am a trustee for West Hill within the RE world. That's my voluntary stuff. The reason why and a few of us have talked about this, I think it's really important that we do link to universities and schools. I really thought about three main things. I know we're going on to explore these in more detail in a little while, but in our introduction, we were going to talk about this too, is firstly, I think it enriches me as a teacher. So it enriches me in my subject knowledge and the curriculums that I put together, which is kind of what Hayley was talking about, but also it enriches the pupils because they get to listen to speakers from academia, also engage with their own research, and it also makes them aware of different universities and what different choices they have, which is kind of what Tim and Paul were discussing before, that there are different choices out there. But I think the main reason why I do it is because it enables me to flourish as a human being, because I'm a lifelong learner and I'm always interested in finding out more. So that was the reasons why, to me, is quite important. But I know now we're going to go on to give a little bit more detail about how these links are effective between us, schools, because I work in a school, and also in HE. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just went through the four of us in alphabetical order. That Rachel is helping to host this session, but has a name beginning with R. So
that's fine.
Technically, my name's beginning with T, so I guess I jumped in ahead of schedule there. So Rachel was just commenting on why we make links between schools and universities. I think it will be really worth talking about that a little bit more next. What's the point of this? Because a lot of universities are not doing enough work to reach out to schools. A lot of school teachers probably don't have regular visits to their local university department. Like, what's it all about? So Rachel's just had a comment. Why don't we go in kind of reverse alphabetical order? Come to Paul next, and then to Hayley. What's the point of trying to make links between schools and universities?
In a word, Tim and everybody, enrichment. I think it's a really key area where we can work together. And when I say enrichment, what I mean is experiences, educational experiences, and opportunities that are go beyond the curriculum, go beyond the specification. Experiences and opportunities that can challenge students intellectually and enable them to broaden their knowledge. Enrichment's not a luxury add-on. But there are lots of different ways in which enrichment in the study of religious studies can be structured. It can be visits to a religious institution or place of worship, to a museum. It can be an open day at a university. It can be a university colleague coming to your school or college to offer a lecture, a seminar, or a workshop, in person or online. And what can these enrichment activities do? They can do quite a range of things. They can cultivate a sense of belonging to a learning community. They can help in the development of transferable skills. They can help promote equity and inclusion. There's a recent report actually called Valuing Enrichment, which was came out of a collaboration between the University of Derby, the Association of Colleges, and the National Council for Further Education. And I'm just going to read a short quote from that report. Enrichment contributes to students' personal development and progression, including to higher education as well as to employment. But enrichment is not only for the future, it helps students remain on their programme. Learners value its social and support networks, cutting across the isolation and mental health issues that can end in withdrawal and social exclusion. And they argue in their report for a national guarantee of access to enrichment due to the positive outcomes it's linked with in terms not only of the retention and progression of students, but also student success on their chosen courses and qualifications. So enrichment's not the only way we in religious studies at the OU have been working with schools and colleges. I can think of at least 2 research projects that have been working with schools and colleges. You might have heard about one of those actually yesterday, the Utopia project that John Wolfe and Steffi and Sinclair were talking about. But it's an area we've been able to offer lectures on topics linked to curriculum, but also more interactive activities that challenge students, take them beyond the curriculum. A good example, I think, of the latter is a session I ran with my colleague, OU colleague, Dr. Maria Nita, at Denby School in Milton Keynes on religion and the climate crisis. And that led to us developing a sort of learning pack for teachers interested in exploring this area. And we also ran a session on religious studies at the Open University to give students a sense of the sort of thing they could expect to study at degree level, and to introduce them to the kinds of research that goes on in the religious studies field broadly. More recently, I've given in-person and online lectures at the Sixth Form College, Colchester, on the sociology of religion and on religious studies at university. And in a few weeks, I'll be doing a bit more, a session on liberation theology and a session on religion and disinformation, the latter with a plan to experiment with some creative arts methods such as drawing and creative writing to explore the role of religion in post-truth society. So I'm now going to talk very briefly about some of the problems that these kinds of relationships that come with these kinds of relationships, and a question for the panel and for colleagues. So one of the problems that we have working with schools and colleges is that it typically relies on personal rather than institutional relationships. For example, the work we did with Denby School ended because our point of contact there moved elsewhere to take up a different job. Similarly, the work with the Sixth Form College in Colchester is entirely dependent on the working relationship that has evolved between Hayley and I. In short, and I think this is true of lots of other instances, enrichment activities depend on ad hoc relationships that largely lack institutional recognition or support, which means they are structurally weak and prone to failure, despite all the evidence pointing to their importance to student success. So my question for the panel and for the audience is, how can we strengthen the relationships between schools and universities so that enrichment ceases to be a lucky extra for our students and becomes a key part of the learning journey?
Yes, that is one of the questions that we've banged our heads against quite a lot. Okay, so Hayley, I'm going to go to you next. Is there anything you'd like to add to your previous comments about the point of making links between schools and universities? What's it for?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I'm passionate about my subject. I love the subject. I really want students to have that same fire in their belly about the subject. But what I was coming up against was there is so much content in, particularly I'm referring to A-level religious studies at the moment, because that is what the only thing really that I teach at the moment. There's so much content that actually sometimes we can't necessarily go off on a tangent and explore something just for the love of discussing and debating and looking into it. So I wanted to create some form of forum where we could look at different aspects from religious studies that perhaps students might really want to explore, discuss, have a look at, that they might not necessarily have that opportunity on our specification. So that was one of the reasons, was I wanted to see, well, what could we do that isn't necessarily seen as being an additional bit of work for them, but is some way of them engaging a bit more with the subject just for the love of it, really. I also wanted to look at opportunities to explore diversity within our subject. So obviously on our specifications, we currently do OCR, but we've done EDUCAS previously. You have a set standard of scholars that you have to look at. You have to look at specific ideas. And actually, it was really interesting. We've had a talk on African philosophy, and we've heard about different philosophers that perhaps we would never necessarily have brought into our classroom before that. And because we have we do have a large number of students, we have a significant range of ethnic diversity within our college, which is wonderful. And we wanted to give students the opportunity to just hear about different ideas and different approaches that they might not have done otherwise. Also, one thing that we were conscious of is how well are we preparing our young people for the next step, whatever that might be. Because in lessons, we might deliver in a certain way, but actually I wanted to expose them to what actually university study might be like for them, be it in religious studies, or actually if they go and study something else, what is it like to listen to an academic talk on something, how are they expected to engage, thinking of questions to discuss and ask. And so it was partly to give them a bit more of a stretch opportunity as well, and really get them thinking about their next steps. So I've been really keen to work with colleagues in higher education, but not from just one institution. I've worked with a range of different institutions to get students to hear not only about different courses, but also to hear from different specialisms, different areas of interest. Because I have philosophy in the department as a standalone A-level as well, I have been keen to make sure that subject is represented as well. So we've brought in and had specific talks that focus on philosophy related topics, and we've had some, I had one yesterday that was on the role of bread within Judaism. And the idea is to cater to students from a range of different backgrounds with a range of different interests. So that's my reasoning for being so keen to develop this relationship between us and university colleagues.
Thank you. So I think there's a few things I'd add to this. One, I think there's a few of my university colleagues in the room at the moment, people who work at universities. I'd say this is a link that's really important in both directions. So one element of this is university academics helping to enrich the school curriculum. I think it's important for us to recognise, or I'd like to say it's important to recognise anyway, that the UK has some of the best scholars of religion and theology in the world. Anyone doing religious studies or RE at school should be thinking, well, I'm part of an academic way of thinking that is actually continued on in this country to a really, really high level, just as you would in any other school subject. And we can show that by bringing people into the classroom. But also, I would say schools and universities in the Theology and Religious Studies line are engaged in the same grand project. We're all working on studying religion, understanding what might be applicable or relevant to us, wrestling with ethical debates, finding ways to take the experience of one person, make sense of it, and explain it to an audience. We're all doing the same thing, and that's not always recognized either in universities or in schools. I think that religious studies is one grand project. And so it's unsurprising to me, at least, that, for example, when schools are developing a religion and worldviews approach to RE, that's quite similar to what a lot of universities have been doing. We've maybe not used the same language, but there's something that university academics should be learning from the school curriculum development program, just as schools might be learning from universities. There's an opportunity for this to be a link that is really important in both directions. And of course, a self-interested point from a university perspective. GCSE RE is a huge success story in this country. A-level religious studies is one of the most popular A-levels. Very few people taking religious studies A-level recognize it as a useful university direction for them. Some do. We've got healthy numbers of students in lots of departments around the country. But if you look at the kind of comparative numbers of people taking the A-level to people doing it at university, something needs to be done, I think, to help school pupils recognize that this might be the university degree for them, so we can continue this grand project going in the future. Anyway, so that's my dream of reasons for making links between schools and universities. So each of us has already gone in a little bit into some detail on the kinds of things that we've actually done, because this is a session where we talk about what works. Paul's already mentioned what a problem, something that doesn't work. But each of us has been working in slightly different areas. So I wanted to go back through and ask for a bit more detail in the kinds of projects that each of you are up to. Why don't I make that a free question? Which of my panel colleagues would like to go first and talk in a bit more detail about the actual projects you've been working on?
Shall I chip in?
Please do.
Okay, so the first thing, which I've alluded to already, is we've introduced a programme of talks. They are at lunchtime. They are about 35 to 40 minutes long, which includes time for questions. And they're on a range of different topics. I do, if possible, sometimes give students options to vote for things that they might like to hear about. And that that is enrichment fundamentally. That is the purpose that I've put behind that, as well as to give students an insight into what studying at HE might be like, particularly what studying religious studies might be like. But alongside that, we've also been working with some colleagues on running subject-specific skills sessions, because actually that is something that I have identified with our students, and leads on quite well from what you just said, Tim, in that our students sometimes don't see where the skills that they're getting from RS might take them, but also they're not quite sure what skills they need for studying RS, and that actually is where we've worked with universities at the start of year 12 with our students to do general essay writing sessions, or how might you critically analyse ideas or look at pieces of research. So we've worked with universities to do study skills workshops effectively. That was kind of a recent development, but that does seem to be working quite well. Our students quite like hearing a different voice, sort of explaining how they might like to do things, just because I think it also breaks things up, and obviously they are familiar with us. They quite like sort of hearing from university colleagues, sort of suggesting how they might like to sort of think about doing research and things like that. So that's been really useful. We've had, if we're doing a particular topic and I know I've got a contact who has a particular area of specialism, I think Tim, I think you delivered a session on secularization, I believe, that was linked very much when we were doing secularization as part of the A-level course. So sometimes we've actually had a talk within a lesson. So even if they're not attending the enrichment sessions, they are actually hearing from university links and finding out ideas there. And the other thing that we do is we have a progression event in the summer term where we actually run a series of different university workshops, and that might be what's the difference between an RS degree and a philosophy degree, for example, and things like that. And that's Paul came in to talk to our students and give a sample lecture for that. So we've tried to run as many different sessions as we can. We also have done university visits. So we took 42 of our students, year 1 and year 2, philosophy RS. We took them to a university. They had a tour. We went to Canterbury. So they went to Canterbury Cathedral. They then had a couple of lectures, so one on St Anselm, and actually just gave them the experience of what actually university is like. That was challenging. I know someone said about the cost. We worked with the university on that, so our students paid a reduced amount because actually the university contributed towards our bus as well. So we managed to make it work that way. Because we are a comprehensive college, we do, we have a really diverse intake. So we needed to be aware of that. And we've used the TRS videos that you've just posted, Tim. We use those in our progression events as well. So students are able to sort of dip in and see what students have actually said. So there's some of the things we've done. I'm happy to answer any questions on that in a little while.
Thank you so much. I have just unexpectedly been handed a baby, so I'm going to keep my microphone off, or there may be some babbling noises in the background. But who would like to go next? Paul or Rachel? Someone jump in and talk more about the examples of things you've done.
Paul, do you want to go next? So because you've worked with Hayley.
Okay, well, I mean, I kind of talked a little bit about that already, but I'm happy to talk about some of the other work I've been doing, which is around research projects. So I've been doing a religious literacy project with some FE colleges, and that has involved doing workshops with a range of learners and sort of introducing religious literacy to British values to the British values segment of the which is a sort of mandatory thing that colleges have to deliver to students regardless of the qualification that they're on. So we've been running these workshops, which has been about empowering both students and FE lecturers in that area, giving them some skills and some know-how and some confidence to to talk about, in broad terms about religion in society in contemporary UK. And then with regard to the disinformation project earlier, we've also been dipping our toes in the water of working with, as I said, arts-based methods in schools to see how we might work with kids. And this has been younger kids and older kids so far, just to see what we might be able to do using those kinds of methods: drawing, painting, poetry, those kind of methods to empower kids, to give them some different ways to articulate themselves around some, well, especially perhaps given the fantastic panel we just had on AI, to start thinking about religion and technology in contemporary society and communication. Yeah. Cheers.
Fabulous. Thank you for mentioning research. Rachael, over to you.
So if I go back to the three things that I think have worked really well as a teacher engaging with HE. So the first one I talked about was really enriching my curriculum and my subject knowledge so I can engage more with, or have a better delivery for the pupils. So I would say if that's something you really want to do, be really clear to begin with about what it is you would like further enhancement of or further help with, because there's so many different research projects going on, and then select appropriately based upon what you feel that need is. Or sometimes looking at those, that can help you. So like, for example, I found things on the RE Online page, and I've engaged with research in that way, or I've just reached out through the NATRE webpage of the links with universities and found out if anybody's doing anything there, or I've even looked on university web pages of academics and made links that way. So two particular research projects that I've engaged with from that. One was with a joint one with NATRE and Bristol University, where we looked at different ways of this shared space. I found that an incredibly enriching project, because it was about how, when you're coming from different worldviews, how can you engage with that effectively in the classroom? How can you enable people to share that space effectively in the classroom? You can find some of the work that's been done on that on the NATRE webpage. And one of my highlights there wasn't just spending time with different academics at Bristol and different groups of teachers down there, but also we went to Corremelia and we looked at the work that they were doing. And it was really enriching and brought back to the classroom experience, but also because I'm a trust-wide leader, it comes back to other teachers that I work with in my trust too. That was a really powerful one. Another one was through Culham. So they've been doing quite a lot of work on how we can engage with worldviews as teachers. So I was part of a group there, and that's really helped my thinking and how I'm changing my Key Stage 3 curriculum with the worldviews. So I said that's a really, really positive way as teachers and universities that we can work together. I think what I'm also really interested though is how we can empower teachers to learn more about this as well and bring that into their own classroom. So one of the things that I do is I work as my trust lead. I work with my local universities, and we help to put on days together that are going to support teachers not only within my trust but across the whole of the Birmingham region. So putting together these days. So if you want to, reach out to your local university and see if there's something there you can do. We've really been conscious, because we've got schools in my trust, some don't have sixth form, some only go up to the age of 16. So we've put on different days for year 9, year 11 and year 13, or year 12, 13, and looked at talking through those different schools, what would we like, and how then the university can facilitate those. So that's another thing that I think is really positive. Go to that NATRE website, look for those links. That really help with developing those links. Something else that I've done, if you really want to engage more with research, just short snippets of research. If you're a NATRE member, in RE Today, there's a research section there where every issue, there's always 2 really useful summaries of current research that you could bring into the classroom. And when I write those, I put little things of what you can do at the top of how they can be brought into the classroom, both at Key Stage 3, 4 and 5, being conscious that we've got teachers who work up to 16 and some will work at up to 18. Like Hayley, I've also done speakers that go into schools, those that come in to talk through the difference between the A-level and so on. But also, I've worked with universities to help create further resources that teachers can use in the classroom, both for GCSE, Key Stage 3 and A-level. Just a few of those highlights there. I mean, Tim's already mentioned the videos on the TRS-UK website where you can look at what the different careers are. I really enjoyed working on that. But a few others that I think are really worth looking into is the quartet, so the 4 British female philosophers. If you go on their website, there's some resources there that can support GCSE and A-level. There's also some work with Beyond Belief that I did with another university where you've got some work there that can support different different levels within schools, so the Key Stage 3, 4 and 5. So there's a lot, I think, of really positive links there that can help make those links between schools and universities.
Thanks so much. There's loads of comments in the chat. Make sure you ask questions as well if you want to us to respond to something. Stick a Q at the front, and then we'll make sure we come back to it as a topic for the group to discuss. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the research that I've done in a couple of areas. My work with the University of Nottingham, I've tried to focus particularly on talking to teachers rather than talking to pupils. So I do, I've gone and given some talks to Hayley's class and other schools when they've contacted and asked for that. But teachers are really good at talking to their pupils, I think. They don't need my help telling them how to run a class activity. But I think my colleagues in Theology and Religious Studies could do a lot to help teachers with their own professional training, for teachers who want to do a little bit more CPD in their own time. So I've been working over the last year or so. My colleagues have been very interested in this. It can be a little bit intimidating, I think, sometimes for academics to talk to school classes because you don't know the children, you don't know their curriculum necessarily. But getting academics to sit down and say, talk to me for 10 minutes about your latest book, in my experience, has been a very easy sell. So we've been putting together a series of videos with academic experts talking about things like what is the religion and worldviews approach and what's its academic foundation? What is non-religion and how do you study it as a university researcher? What are the different disciplines of academic research and academic scholarship that might feed into RE, that kind of thing. Some of those are already published, some of them are underway. Last summer, I was able to get a bit of funding to send a university student to go explore stories of Buddhist and Hindu communities in Nottingham. So we have some resources around that we published in due course as well. And I'm hoping that those will be particularly useful for teachers who want to develop their own subject knowledge. The other thing I've done quite a bit of, and there's people in the room who may wish to say more about this and we get on to the comments, but political engagement. The RE community, I think, does an amazing job of political engagement, talking to government and saying what schools need and what teachers need. Universities can be part of that project. Lots of universities are very keen to do that and find ways to see if there might be a bit of academic weight that they could bring to bear on improving matters at school and university. If we're going to do that, we need to work together. So I was able to join, over the last few years, some ongoing RE community projects to go talk to politicians and say, academic research proves you need to make things better in schools, and this is how to do it. We had talked as a panel about this question of political engagement and curriculum reform, and I wondered if my colleagues would like to come back to that at all, because I think that's one area that we haven't discussed very much as yet. What could universities and schools be doing to work together for curriculum reform? Oh, they've all gone quiet. Who wants to go first on that topic?
I mean, I think that's a really good question, but I would like to hear from other people in the room. We've had we've been talking for over half an hour. It'd be nice to hear some other voices.
Okay, perfect. Well, and let's put that up as a question that we'd like to put to the people in the room. As academics and teachers, we're interested in seeing how universities and schools can work together on the ongoing curriculum review. So let's start having a look through the chat and seeing what questions there are to respond to. But I can happen to see that Deborah Weston is raising a hand on my camera. So let's see what Deborah would like to say in response to that. Deborah, do you know anything about political engagement?
A little bit, yeah. So I've been working with Tim and others on this aspect of the work, and it was a piece of research in itself, taking Tim along to Parliament to talk to parliamentarians about religious education. And one thing, having done this for a very long time, I noticed that when Tim was there, it changed the conversation. There were obviously parliamentarians who wanted to hear from and were influenced by the fact that there was an academic in the room giving evidence from research about the value of the subject. So I think that's really important. So I think it'd be really good, essential, I think, in this particular climate, for more academics to engage with this, more engagement with local parliamentarians and those in Westminster, to just to demonstrate just how important religious education is. And I think this government has said they want to know what works, they want to hear from experts. Well, universities are full of experts, so I think they need to hear from you. And obviously the curriculum assessment review is one way, but definitely direct contact, particularly in your local area, with your Member of Parliament, I think would be a really good step forward.
And Tim was very good at that. He managed to get lots and lots of MPs to come and talk to us when he came to the Labour Party conference last year. If there was a prize, he would have won it.
Well, I mean, there's an added advantage here if you're able to get a university involved, because then, MPs are very interested in responding to their constituents. If your constituent comes and says, "I am a major employer in your local area because the university has got thousands and thousands of people coming in and spending money, and you need the university to survive," well, that adds an extra bit of weight for MP communication. I'm just scrolling back to see what questions have popped up, of which there are a few. We have a question about from Ruth, what advice we would give for primary or Key Stage 3 connections. Colleagues, what do you think about making primary and Key Stage 3 connections? My own advice is that universities need to be reaching out to primary teachers. We actually, for example, there's a University of Nottingham project called Learning Leaders, which has been quite successful, where we talk to primary schools around the Nottinghamshire area and say, would you like university students to come and run some classes for you? And then we train up university students in all sorts of different subjects in how to run an effective primary event. And we get people going and teaching philosophy and ethics and religious studies, and lots of other subjects as well in primary schools. And from a university point of view, you can build that as a starting kind of early on in the education process to get children of all ages to think that actually university and higher education might be an achievable goal for them. So that for that reason, it's a very worthwhile thing for universities to get involved with, and primary schools seem to like it. So that's what we do.
I think if I can just say, you made a point earlier about maybe, I always think it's the teachers who are kind of scared of approaching the academics, but maybe it works both ways. Like you said, sometimes the academics are not quite sure how, or how would I say it when I'm going to say it wrong. So I think that that really made me think of it being two ways. And what you've just said there about training people up to do it is really powerful. And everyone just being bold enough to kind of ask, I've used Twitter a lot to reach out to people and sent them comments from students, and the students are always like, wow, that professor really cares about what I think. I'm just a little student in Bethnal Green, and it's just really enriching. So thank you.
Brilliant. Other colleagues, do you want to say anything about your experience of primary connections or Key Stage 3?
If I go back, I can't really talk about primary because I'm not a primary specialist, but I know there are other people here that are, and if they want to share anything they've done, please feel free to do so. But Key Stage 3, the way I've done it is, I've said I've looked, so I've done it as trust-wide, where we've looked at what are the gaps, what would we really like. So for example, at the moment, one of our focuses is we are looking at diversifying and decolonising our curriculum. So we have reached out to different colleagues at university. So we had a speaker in this week who was superb, who looked at the local diversity in Birmingham and talked about how we are one of the most diverse cities in the world, not just in the UK, and talked about that great diversity. And then he's going to be working with us, where we're going to put a bid in for some funding where we can come together to create a unit of work where we can all use, not just our schools, but across Birmingham as well, plus have resources, because we plan to go and video people who are key people across the community from Birmingham, that we can use in our Key Stage 3 curriculum. So that came from a need that we all felt we wanted. I reached out then to different universities to see who might be able to help us with that need. But we've got somebody who specialises in decolonisation, nothing to do with Birmingham, completely different university, that's coming in to support and help us as well. So I would come back to what I originally say. Think about what you want, then try and see if you can identify people who can help with that need. That's been my experience. That's worked really, really well. But there are other colleagues on here that can talk through what they have done as well, because this is just one case study. There are multiple ways of doing this. I think, Katerina, I think you had something to add on that, didn't you? Because you put your hand up, as I said, primary, unless I've completely got the wrong end of the stick there.
No, you're absolutely right, Rachel, if you can hear me. So I'm previously a primary school head, so I do have a primary background, but now an advisor in the diocese. I've joined recently my local SACRE in Essex, and we're working quite closely, very closely, with Anglia Ruskin University. And they've been working with us to put on, where it was a Jewish living experience they hosted at the university. We had lots and lots of local primary schools come and attend that, and a few secondary as well, because they adjusted it for the secondary schools. It's been really powerful. We're looking at it for next year as well. But our Ben, who is the university lecturer, he's also providing lots of CPD for our primary schools as well. So we're working really, it's all done through the SACRE. That's the hub of the conversations, etc. And it seems to be working. So I don't know if that's something other SACREs and universities are doing as well, but it's working for us.
Thank you for that, Katrina.
We had another question from the chat about the best timing and format for making CPD accessible to teachers, from Beth, pointing out Jewish colleagues, for example, might not be able to do Saturdays. So I'll say I've tried to find out what is the single answer to the question, what format of CPD do teachers most want, by running a couple of surveys. Send them as widely as possible and ask teachers, what CPD do you want? And the response basically was everything. I was obviously hoping that everybody would agree that there was one perfect answer for everyone. But some teachers said they wanted really long videos. Some teachers said they wanted really short videos. Some teachers said they wanted PDFs to download. Some people said they wanted live webinars. My encouragement to universities would be to do it just as much as possible. And see what works for you and what works in your particular area. There's probably not one magic solution for everybody. For example, with my colleague Celine Benoit, we are currently working to turn the religion and worldviews videos, which I posted earlier on into the chat, into a CPD resource that schools could run for themselves as a day-long event or as an evening session. Some schools will want to do that. Other schools might prefer to watch the videos by themselves. When we ran our survey asking about what people wanted, the most popular response was actually very short videos, which I found interesting. I was imagining as a lecturer that people would say, "Oh, lectures, please. We love lectures." They did not. The most popular answer was to say like 5 to 10 minute videos explaining topics in clear ways with backup resources we can read later. But other people may find different things work for them. There's been a few mentions in the chat already of universities that run very successful live webinars every month or so that are very popular as lunchtime sessions for lots of schools. Is there any other comment on the format question? Anything you found particularly effective? Hayley has already responded there in the chat that flexibility is key, which is what I would agree to, I think.
I think it just comes back to what the group is, the needs of that particular group. As Hayley says, real flexibility. So the one that I'm trying to organise, we've all come up with different dates. So we tried to look for a commonality of when we can do things. we try and do hybrid, so some online and in person, sometimes just online, sometimes just on person, at different times of the year, sometimes just after 4, sometimes just after. I think it's whatever you do, you can't win. And it is about flexibility, trying to keep changing it. So I'm in a local group where I do get a lot of academic speakers to speak to the different group, to people in Birmingham and beyond. And I do it on different days of the week. I do it sometimes at 4:30, sometimes at 5:30, sometimes at 6. I can't do it during the day because I'm teaching during the day. And I'll be honest with you, some people always come up to all of them. Some people come to that one because they can't do that one. So I just think, as Hayley says, it's all about flexibility and looking the cohort that you've got and what you want to do, if that helps at all. Has anybody got any further questions, a bit more about, maybe want to share what they've done in Effective Link, or anything else that they want to ask us about where we've done Effective Links, or any more of the issues that we've had? Please feel free to ask them. Put your hand up or pop it in the chat.
You've got a question from Evie, Rachel, in the chat, which is we're struggling for numbers with numbers for A level. We have sixth form open evenings on Thursday. Can you offer advice about how we can help and encourage pupils to make connections and see the value in religious studies, philosophy, ethics, and theology?
I think with that, it's always about bringing it back to the real world. So what are you studying that is going to be linked to contemporary issues? So, for example, I will pull things out from the ethics course that is going to be linked to decisions that are being made politically now. And the obvious one is the assisted dying bill that's going through. So I will talk about that. But equally, you could talk about how we're looking at, just even, how they've just decided they're going to get rid of the winter fuel allowance for all pensioners. So we talk about the ethics of that. So I'm always trying to bring it back to real world studies. That's the first thing I would recommend. Secondly, I always get back previous students that have studied it. They are always the best sellers for your subject. So a lot of my former students keep in touch with me, and they'd come back, and they always come back just before Christmas or just straight after Christmas, depending on when their terms are compared to us. And we'll speak about how they have found this subject being relevant to the courses they're going on to do. And I'm quite savvy in the people that I pick. So, for example, I pick people who are doing medicine, doing law. I've got somebody who's doing engineering. And I also try and pick people who have gone to aspirational universities as well, because they will always sell your subject. So that's the second thing I do. The third thing I do is talk about transferable skills. So I talk about how we have argument-driven essays and how useful they're going to be for whatever career you're going on to do. And how they're going to be useful for any subject at post A level, because you really do need to be able to construct really good essays. I also try to make sure that I do a little sample lesson with my GCSE students, and if I can, I get current students that are doing it to pop into that lesson as well. So they're just some of the things. But it's also about thinking about how you put that A level together. So I have a visiting speaker program, so I talk about that. I also have a little mini library, and I pick really carefully books, films that they could watch, which aren't academic things, but that link to what I'm looking at, that they could also read and go away and explore. But I would just say, really think beyond just the subject, all these different links that you can make to sell it. It is the best subject in the world, and it is absolutely fascinating. And then think about how you're going to teach it. I love teaching it. I've been teaching this for 25 years and I'm not bored yet. So I think, if you remember right, Fiona, you might remember this, I'm pretty sure there is an article on that me and Zamir wrote on selling your subject to A level. I'm pretty sure there's one on the NATRE website. Can you remember?
I think there might have been.
I think there is.
I think that was something I used.
Yeah. And one more thing I've forgotten about is I do an assembly, and I'm going to pinch some of that AI stuff and do it in an assembly to sell it. It's just basically be the best seller that you can be. I reckon it's great. We've got a great subject to sell. So go from there. And I'm happy to follow up that conversation if it helps. Hayley, I don't know if you want to add, because you've also got good numbers like I have.
Yeah. To be fair, everything that you've just gone through are things that we do. I really want to emphasize your students are your best sellers. So we use previous students. We have a couple of them come in, and we also talk about where they've gone to. And because I think it's not one of the challenges we have, it's not just the students we need to convince, it's also the parents. And we need to make it clear that, because a lot of them say, well, it's not a facilitating subject. And you just say, yeah, that's not actually the point. It develops all of these skills, and it is a highly regarded subject. And so it's about convincing the parents, or that for us, that is one of our challenges. So we have our former students and we talk about where they've gone to and what they've gone on to do, but we also have our current students. And I don't sort of say, oh, only second year students can come. I have both first and second years. The first years can, they've only been studying it 6-7 weeks, and they can talk about what they've done and how they've enjoyed it. But I also think really emphasising those transferable skills has been one of the biggest things that I've sort of really focused on. I've made sure our displays show that as well. And I've acknowledged things like, in our displays, I've put things like, we've got a diversity in the curriculum board, which has got, if you're interested in feminist philosophy, maybe you might like to look at these people, so that when they're coming up the corridor, they're not just into a room and there's a group of people there talking about RS, but actually as soon as they get into our corridor, they get the buzz of what our subject's about, that it's not just about kind of sitting down and learning sort of names, that actually there's so much more to it. So yeah,
I'd agree with that. It's just making it alive. We're just so lucky that the material is amazing.
Absolutely.
And it's so relevant. Just even Plato, people go, oh, he's dead 2,500 years ago. He might be, but his subject is still relevant. Keep looking back and keep trying to make those links all the time. It's honestly it's fabulous. Just keep looking at that. Sorry, I've hijacked that back. And yeah, Shrey was an amazing student as well, Fiona. Just like Fiona's comment. Are there any further questions that you'd like us to share or talk about?
I think Belinda had a hand up previously. I don't know, Belinda, if you still wanted to make that.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, hi, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say, echo what I can't remember who the speaker was for it originally, Deborah, I think it was, saying about it's the gravitas that teachers, many of us are teachers who've come from all sorts of walks of life, and we are just seen perhaps as voters, or it's clear that many politicians, not all, many politicians don't really value teachers. You can see that in policy decision making sometimes, and particularly RE teachers. But then you bring in an academic with your ability to refer directly to research and papers that have been written, or in fact that you've even written, and the titles that you carry be well earned as well. I think it just makes many politicians actually listen to what you're saying, and it lends that feeling of solidarity to us, as all of us as RE fans and champions. So yeah, I just think it's really important to be speaking to politicians. That was my point. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a question that we probably haven't got a magic answer to. Paul mentioned earlier on the great challenge of trying to build links between universities and schools that are bigger than personal connections of individuals. I'd be really interested if anyone has the magic wand to solve that. A lot of the most successful schools outreach or school university link projects that I know of really are based on an individual teacher or an individual academic who has a passion for this, pursuing those links and chasing them as long as they can. I would love to see something a little bit more structured to that, and conferences like this one are a great way to build something that is more of an annual event or regular event that's not dependent on one person's particular connections. We can, I guess, just make that a point for the room, that at the moment the most effective links between schools and universities are based on personal connections, and the best approach for a teacher who wants to make those links is to use one of the web pages we've mentioned, like making links with the universities that's been listed in the chat, or the RE hubs. Find some email addresses, send out messages to different people in your local area and just see who responds. And if you keep doing that, you will find that actually there are very nice people working at your local university who will hopefully respond to all of your emails, and you get to know them a bit over time and find that there's a little database of people who you can contact when you say, hey, I'm interested in African philosophy. Who should I have on my curriculum for next semester? And they'll either know the answer or know who to put you in touch with. So kind of developing those links would be my advice, perhaps. But has anyone got examples of something a bit more structured than that, that's not so dependent on individuals?
I think there are some things out there, and I've just picked up on a question that Fiona's also responded to about lack of time, and I think this links brilliantly with lack of time. I know what it's like. I mean, there is no time. You come home exhausted, and we've got thousands of classes. Sometimes it feels like we teach the world and a few of their dogs. But I think then go for easy wins that are already set up. So somebody mentioned the Chester A-level conferences. That's really useful. You know, that's there for you. It's really easy to access. There are also some resources. So, for example, there's one coming out at the moment that David, who used to work at Chester, who now works at St Andrews, who's done some work on linking to the GCSE on the use of animals and how you can bring those into. And so I teach AQA at GCSE, and there's a whole question on how we should use animals. Can we eat them? Can we experiment on them? But that is just a really easy win of engaging with research. You could pull on those resources that they've put together, and it doesn't take a lot of time, and it fits what you're already doing. So they are some models I think are already in place that have been really successful. Please do use those if you are really struggling full time, because I do know what it's like. Sometimes we feel like we are drowning and you're exhausted and you just want an easy thing. But don't forget as well, we do some of those research summaries in RE today. Have a look at those too. That's another quick, easy win. Hayley, I don't know if you've got any more suggestions, especially for us when we're so time constrained.
It is exactly that, I think. I always signpost the Bangor and the Chester lectures because they are an easy win. Manchester is doing an introduction to, I think it's an introduction, or it's a RS and theology taster session on the 23rd. We've got open evening, so I've said, look, if you'd like to join before open evening, I'll set it up in this room. It's on Zoom. And so those are the easy wins, I think. And by easy, I'm not saying that we haven't got a lot of things that we're juggling at the same time, but you can just sort of forward over the flyer and just keep drawing attention to these things. I've had a few students attend those things. I would say possibly the uptake isn't that huge because I'm not constantly there reminding them, you know, the Bangor sessions, for example, are on a Sunday. But I also think, so I sent the same email to pretty much anyone that I found a contact for. And then I didn't keep chasing the ones that I got no response from because I haven't got time to keep chasing that. So I've focused on building links with the people that I'm getting a response from rather than constantly trying to grow my network of who I asked to do talks, which perhaps is limiting the exposure of my students to a range of different universities, but I just don't have the capacity to keep chasing and building without getting something back. So that's something else as well, I think, you know, knowing where your limitations are and just pursuing what's working for you.
I really support what you have just said. I don't think that's your limitation at all. I think that is very sensible strategy. There are lots of people out there working in universities. Some of them are very interested in schools. Some of them are not. Some of them maybe didn't know that they were interested, but they actually might be if you reach out to them. If someone doesn't answer an email, that's fine. There are a million other people who also work in religious studies who could help you instead. So building those links sounds like a really good idea. There's some discussion in the chat of university competitions. There are lots and lots of these things like essay competitions that are essay competitions, video competitions, imagery competitions, all sorts of things that students might be interested in. One that I'd like to bring more to the attention of RE teachers is the Ethics Cup, which is a kind of special debating competition that University of St Andrews started, but it has regional competitions all over the country. So there's probably one close to you. I think it's mostly pitched to philosophy teachers, but it's for students who would like to discuss ethical questions in a way that is more collaborative and supportive than a traditional debate might be. And it looks just very RE shaped to me. It looks like the kind of thing that RE teachers could absolutely be directing their classes towards.
Can I
so
add
if you don't
to
know about
that?
the Ethics Cup,
Can I add to that
yes.
you could do the Ethics Cup, but you could also run a philosothon yourself. So you could get together in a group of schools in your local area. There's also that it's very, very similar to Ethics Cup. And with the philosothon, you can do all kinds of different stimulus. And so we run it in our area, and all local schools can come along. And sometimes that's easier than going to a university. So there are different things out there that you can run, or you can go to those that are run. But that can also help numbers. And it's very much, both of them are based on this community of inquiry approach towards studying the subject, if that helps. But I think,
I think we're about to be out of time. I
Yeah.
haven't seen a notification that we're about to get kicked out, but I assume we are.
Yes, I was about to say you have 10 seconds. Can I just say it's been brilliant? I'm too busy writing things down to notice this. So that just shows what a great session it's been. Do grab things from the chat. I've tried to grab some of those. And can we just give a big thank you to our 4 speakers, because it's been a brilliant session.